Jerry, welcome to the podcast today.
That was my favorite tone, by the way.
Can I give you an imagination exercise?
I'm ready.
I want you to imagine, close your eyes, relax. I want you to imagine that you are no longer you. You're you, but in the past. You don't know what you know now. And you've decided you want to start drumming or start playing guitar or start painting. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe start playing baseball. And these are things you now know how to do. What would you tell yourself? You're like brand new. What's your first piece of advice you'd give?
Know what you want to do it for.
Oh man, that's my answer too. Goal setting.
Yeah.
It sounds so uncreative, but it sounds corny almost. But man, that would have changed so much.
Well, I mean, I think it's potentially all sources of frustration. It's all sources of satisfaction. It's everything, because if your goal is to be a virtuoso, but you practice 2 hours a week, you're not going to be a virtuoso. And I think for me, that aligned. I just wanted to use the instrument to write and practiced accordingly.
So how much did you have to practice?
A lot to start.
Could you even remember first starting guitar? Like the first time you picked up a guitar?
Yeah, funny.
How'd you do it?
I bought a cheap guitar. It was a black Epiphone. It sounded horrible.
Wait, you have to back up before that. How'd you decide that this was going to be a good idea?
I just was one of those things, man. That's the way things go in my life. It's like there's some increment of time before that thing where I'm like, I'm going to do this. And then I just wake up one day and go to the store and buy a guitar.
I feel like obtain a guitar is definitely a key part to learning to play guitar. But then all the rest of it, there's a lot less buying stuff, right? Once you have a guitar in your hand, you really don't need much else.
Most people get caught in the anticipation phase, and they stay in the anticipation phase. I need to do this checklist of things. I need to make all the conditions need to be perfect for me to do this thing. And that never happens.
Now I don't feel like we're talking about guitars anymore. I feel like this is just totally generalized.
It is, but it's the same thing. You could make it whatever you wanted to make it. That's the way I operate. Sometimes I get stuck there a little longer for whatever it is that I want to do. I did with painting, because that is something that I had held the notion that you had to go to school for, or you had to be, have certain skills. It's just another expression. And I think most people get caught in the anticipation phase of whatever thing it is that they want to do.
Do you remember? So you played drums before guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Did somebody give you a drum kit? Did a drum kit show up? Like, how did that one work?
It was at our church already.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you played them ever?
Yeah, and it's the weirdest thing, man. There was no confusion over what to do.
What does that mean?
Like, I didn't have to watch videos, or like, I just knew if I want all the things, I just knew what to do. Now, I didn't sit down and jam along with Rush albums, but like the mechanics of playing drums was very, very intuitive to me.
Did somebody put like tell you you're gonna have to do this first and you need to count out loud? You're just like, I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna keep a beat.
That's how it went. And then I would do that like when we were over there and nobody was in the building. I would do that. And then one day I was just playing with the church band.
And how old were you when you first sat down behind the kit?
12 or 13, maybe 14. I don't know.
Yeah, that's when I started playing guitar. My mom had a guitar from when I was a kid. It's like a crummy nylon stringed guitar with a vinyl case, not a like a soft side gig baggy type of thing. And I remember it was a big deal that I was allowed to touch it, basically. And I was probably 12, maybe 13. definitely at least 12. And so I got to touch the guitar, and I got signed up for a class, through the county or whatever. And we sat in a circle in some elementary school gym, and we only messed with the highest three strings pitch wise, the nylon strings. And it was like torture. It was not fun at all. It was the total opposite of fun. But I was like, I want to learn this. I want to learn how to play guitar. Maybe there'll be a point in the future when it starts to sound more like guitar, which it kind of did. But my gosh, it took a long time. And that starting point was really hard to get past. I think the only reason I did it was because I watched other people play guitar successfully. And I was like, well, there must be a point in the future where if I do the lesson, there must be a part later when you learn a chord, right? Or I didn't even know what a chord was, but you might learn it must eventually sound like music. If I did something that was that difficult now, or if I started it and the path was so far from I am going to try and pick an open note to it's going to sound like a song when I strum it, there's no way I would do it. There's no way. I would be like, oh man, it's going to take way too long. There's not a chance I'm doing this.
So it's interesting what you present, I think, is again a generalization for everything. So I learned the opposite way. I put on my Uncle Tupelo and Sunvolt records and was like,
I'm going to learn this.
had a book of chords beside me and tried to find the note on the
Yeah.
guitar that sounded like that chord that they were playing.
Right.
What note was that? Now, what chord is that? And that all happened so I wanted songs. I didn't want weeks of strumming Jimmy Crack Corn or playing, notes of whatever. I wanted songs.
Hot
And
cross buns. A
hot
lot of
cross buns, exactly.
Yankee Doodle.
Yeah. Now the flip side of that is we were laughing about this earlier this week at rehearsal. I don't know the first thing about music theory. Now that's independent of learning to play guitar, but I don't care. Like I have done with the instrument and with this whole thing what I want to do with it.
How old were you when you started playing guitar?
22, 21, 21, 22, something like
By
that.
which point you had literal years of exposure to people playing guitar.
For sure.
Yeah. See, so that's the thing. I think to answer my own imaginary question that I gave you, that I can't decide which is a bigger deal. Just either do it. That's probably my first choice is just do it. Like just pick it up, play it. You'll figure it out. That would go for art and music. I have no frame of reference for whether that applies to baseball. And I want to be very clear here. This is advice to get to be over the hump of starting. This is not advice to become a professional musician. I don't have that advice. But getting over the hump to be a hobbyist, the same thing for artists. Like you can't taking my advice will not get you to art school. But it'll get you over the hump of being like, well, I don't know how to draw, or I don't feel comfortable, making art, or I don't feel comfortable playing music or whatever. Just, do it and don't worry about it, and eventually it'll get better.
What's the Beethoven quote about not needing to go to music school?
Oh, it was, hold on, I've got this one. Da-na-na-na. That was it, right? That's what he said?
No, that's what he played. He has a quote about something to the effect of if you need to be trained to be an artist or a musician, then you're not an artist or musician.
Oh, that's a really uptight thing to say.
Coming from
I
him.
understand the nugget of truth to that, but also what an uptight thing to say. Because you could take it one of two ways. You can take it as no matter the amount of schooling, if you're not an artist, you'll never be an artist, which is very uptight and condescending and gatekeepy. But you could also look at it as don't get hung up on whether or not you've been schooled. Do art.
See, I think that's the intent. I think the intent is there, and this is my belief as well. I think the intent is there are a lot of people who are technically incredibly proficient at whatever medium of art they're doing, but the material isn't great. Like,
yeah, of course,
I know a lot of guitar players specifically who are really, really can doodly do all day long, but can't write. And same thing with artistry.
Did you
I
start writing songs when you were playing drums?
No, but I've always, um, I don't, I think I, I've always sort of written from a rhythm perspective first.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and maybe that has to do with because that's the first instrument I played on. That's what I'm drawn to in a song sonically is the rhythm, like the the drive of the song, and that it kind of goes from there. And
How about
maybe I
feel?
don't know.
Do you consider feel coming from the rhythm section too? You got
Yeah,
like
oh, for
tempo,
sure,
intensity.
for sure. To me, sonically, the sonic aesthetic of a song, regardless of genre, is determined by the drummer. To me, that's the way I hear it.
That's fair
Eh,
enough. I mean, there's probably counterpoints to that, but I don't think it's necessary. I don't think you're wrong.
Well, and so that doesn't mean that could be interpreted as I think if the drummer is not Neil Peart or Choose Your Person, that the sound is bad. There are some Ringo Starr. Ringo Starr, I think, kind of, I don't want to say made the Beatles because that is very much an over assertion, but I think Ringo Starr's sound aesthetic contribution to the band can't be overstated. It, I think if you took a lot of the Beatles recordings and took the drums out of it and had somebody else play those parts in their style on their equipment, and this is of course a no-brainer, it's going to sound different. And for me, like he locked that in. He locks that in.
I think it's easier. This is kind of speculative, but I think it's easier. And this is also not necessarily aimed at somebody who's spending all their time making music, but for regular people or hobbyists. My opinion of this is that it can be easier to make a song by feel from drums than it is from guitar. So in order to express yourself on the guitar in a way that has a lot of nuance and subtlety and flourish and flair and emotion to the way in which you actually make the sound come out of the instrument, it takes a really long time on guitar to learn that to do
Yeah.
it well. Um, but to do the same thing on drums, like a lot of it is play harder, play softer, choose when to be silent, and that gets you really far in terms of what having something to say in the song, or having an interpretation of the song that you're learning, and playing it with just volume, intensity. That's that gets you so far. Whereas guitar, learning how to even make it sound like the bass line of someone playing guitar. I noticed with a lot of guitar players who are just starting out or within the first couple of years that I've met over the last, I don't know, half a decade or so. They'll get they'll learn a ton of chords. They'll already be like writing songs and stuff. But then their strumming hand or their picking hand it hasn't caught up. And so there's not a lot of emotion that they're playing, and it sounds like dun 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 or dun na 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 na, and it's just so flat. Even if they can finger all the chords correctly, even if they can play a solo in between the chords, they haven't figured out how to emote with the other hand. And on drums, it's like do it on the table, and you've got the same idea. You can do it on the mic.
Yeah.
I mean, like anybody can do that. Not
Yeah.
that anybody can play drums, but anybody can articulate themselves on drums faster, in my opinion.
But I think the really skilled drummers merge two things. They hear the intent of the writer of the song, or
Mm-hmm.
if they're the writer, they already know the intent, but they're absorbing the intent from that thing, and they're bringing their own experience outside of the instrument to their playing. And those two things are meshed by a skilled drummer in a non, if you're playing in a symphony, you have very technical requirements of what you're supposed to play and when, and that's that. And it's the overall mosaic that is the consumed art.
I
But
think
in
it's safe to say we're not talking about a symphony player.
correct, yeah. So in a you know rock environment or
Garage band.
whatever garage band, the drummer has the ability. I just feel like you can tell a drummer who gets it right away,
Instantly.
instantly. There's a technical proficiency that doesn't mean hitting a lot of things.
No, not at all.
It just means they've got the vibe of what's going on comprehensively in the piece, but also they're bringing their piece to it, and the whole thing thrives on it. I feel drums instantly, even with my guys that I play with. If they're not playing the song the way we've played it, I feel it instantly, and it's a thing.
You've had the same drummer for a while.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I've done, there's like a collective that Clyde is.
That's how old people play music. No offense. They don't, like you don't just have a band. You have a group and you switch
Yeah,
personnel
yeah,
and you don't have, oh, we're gonna have practice and it's gonna be the three of us and we're gonna sit down and write together and we're gonna hang out together and we're gonna have band practice together. No, it's like you have your life and you come together when it's band time and you fill in as needed.
yeah.
Totally a collective.
It's a collective, and usually the writing is, I send out the songs and encourage everybody to do with it what they will, and that's the writing process.
How
And
does it? How does this apply to somebody that's brand new? Because you're talking about like the great drummers do this, and this is how a band that's how long has Clyde been around? 20 years, 15
oh
years?
man, no, 23, almost 25 years.
Yeah. So a 2 decades old band who's kind of got it figured out what it means to be a band. What does that mean for the first 6 months if I'm just starting playing? Does any of this stuff apply?
Yeah, it's going to be nasty. Even if you're all like, if you're, unless the caveat is like, if you're jazzers from university and you're trained or whatever, if you're playing pieces that you've trained on, yeah, you're going to have that down. But if you're playing original material, I don't care your skill level, it's not going to be a thing. It's not going to have where all the pieces sit together and the rhythms in a pocket and the singer's comfortable with hearing all the noises. There are so many new, it's not writing music and playing music that translates from the idea into the performance, whether that's a recorded performance or a live performance. That is not the technical proficiency of the person or the group of people in their instruments. That's a thing that has to mesh together. And it's going to sound awful at first, no matter how good the players are. Now, if you're just starting out with your instrument and others are just starting out with their instruments, it's a train wreck. I know this firsthand.
Well, so I think what's funny here, my reason for asking actually had very little to do with teasing out your actual advice. I care about that. I want to hear it,
No, you
but
don't. No, you
I
don't.
know I do. But what I really wanted to test here is how hard is it for somebody who's been in the thing for a long time to get out of that and put themselves in the brand new person's shoes. Like they really don't know anything. They really like it's really I'm plucking one string. I have no calluses. I've never held a drumstick. I've never been on a stage before in front of people. I've never had a light shine on me. Like none of that stuff. I've never used a microphone. Like the ground zero and the stuff that we kind of like build on. It's amazing how much of a foundation you get from like picked up here and there, but also just sort of stuff you learn through osmosis or just having rubbed off on you. And it's not unique to this space. I remember talking to an ultra runner. Ultra runners run 100-mile races. I think that's what makes it an ultra, which is just absurdly far, horrible for the body.
I
But
was going to say, that's
it's
you might as well
outrageous.
smoke. Just smoke cigarettes, like drink and smoke.
Yeah.
That's what you should do.
I don't know that ultras are bad for the lungs, but they're tough on the joints and the muscles.
They're hard on your heart.
Your
They're
guts, not good on the guts either. Anyway, so ultra marathoner, who I'm sorry for now insulting ultra marathoners unintentionally. You're doing a great job, everybody. Keep running. And I was like, hey, when was the last time you didn't run? He's like, well, I had a soccer injury in college. This guy was probably 55 when I asked him this question. He was like, well, I had a soccer injury, so I took a little break then. And if I, after a race, I'll take it easy for a couple days. I'm like, no, didn't run. What, like when you say take it easy, what do you mean take it easy? Like, well, only like keep it down to like 5, 6, 7 miles a week for a week or so. Just really, really ease up after a race. I'm like, it's 7 miles a week. I run 0 miles and ever. And he couldn't do it. He could not put his mind into a place that was 40 years prior when he had not ever run more than a day or two. And so for 40 plus years, there was no day in his life where he had not gone out and gone for a run. And I literally could not even fathom the question of when was the last time you didn't run. And I don't think we're that far. Because I think we're a little bit closer to actually remembering no callus. Certainly in my case, I'm closer to being a brand new person, brand new musician than this guy was to being a brand new runner. But it's crazy. It's crazy how far you would take for granted the stuff that was the beginning or the really beginning or the really, 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 really beginning. The kid who picked up a guitar when they were 3, they didn't do anything with it, but they picked it up. Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't foreign to them the first time that they then tried to make a sound out of it.
So funny story to that point. Funny story. My son, when he was 18 months old, I would set out pots and pans on the kitchen floor when I was
Mm-hmm.
cooking and give him plastic dishes or plastic utensils, and he would bang on them. And he would take them in the bathtub and he would bang on them.
Mm-hmm.
And he never had formal drum lessons. He's a badass little drummer.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Because he started young and it wasn't. You get over the unfamiliarity hump.
Yeah.
Think about how many things there are in your life. We spend 100% of the time talking about stuff that we already have some frame of reference for. Think
Hmm.
about how many things that are out there that not only do we not know a lot about or aren't experts on, but we have zero basis. We just have nothing. We have nothing to go on. And every single thing we learned about it would be, the newest of the new. And that bucket of stuff is basically infinite. And everything we're talking about is this one tiny little micro droplet of the stuff we already know.
I need that. I need that. I need that to be the case. I
You don't have a
need
choice, so it's a good thing.
well, but I need to. So the overwhelming. There are very few things that overwhelm me in life, but that overwhelms me that there's so much new to uncover, and I'm never going to get to it
No, never.
ever, ever. Like even cursor. That's why when I meet somebody, I was just talking about this last night. When I meet somebody, I don't want to talk about sports. They'll get my eye contact and a head nod, and I'm with them, but I'm thinking about how I could stab myself in the face with my wine glass. But if somebody's got something that is something I've never heard or like a unique take on something, I want to hear it. Like that's it's not hyperbole that gets me through life. I love it. I
when you put
thrive on it.
when you phrase it that way, I'm sort of amazed at how often we manage to achieve near flawless conformity with one another. Not you and me. That obviously we're good at that, but random strangers, and you still manage to find like that one little sliver of the most boring, tedious thing that nobody's going to get offended by, but also nobody's going to be surprised by, and
Yeah.
that's just like that's natural. I think that's part of getting along, right?
So you sent me like it warmed my soul. You just sent me a little blurb about a bird called a swift that set the record for the longest interrupted flight.
Longest uninterrupted flight.
That's what
Yeah.
I loved it. Like
How often do you think about birds?
never. I
Yeah.
mean, when I see them, like I'm like, I wish I knew what species that was. I don't know. I might know a cardinal just because they're red or a blue jay because they're blue, but I don't know birds.
Uh, how many colors does a cardinal come in?
Two, and the male, surprisingly, bucking this evolutionary trend, the male is the most colorful or the more colorful of the two.
Oh, that's a super common evolutionary trend. Think about the
Is
peacock.
it?
Yeah. So
Oh, it,
think about a peacock versus a peahen. The ladybird is very unembellished. The male is very flowery and has the big tail and everything. Rooster versus chicken. Rooster's got all the furniture on the face. And these are all bird examples, but lion, Maine. Um, yeah, tons of examples of
Well,
attracting a mate.
it got sideways in our species, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, sure. I think that's where that's not a good example. I read this one book one time on evolutionary biology that was in the form of a a self help book written like an advice column that animals would write in and be like, "Hey, I have this problem. Can you please help me?" And then it was explained in terms of it was basically sort of like a I don't know. The genre was pop evolutionary biology, but it was very entertaining. I learned a lot about animals.
Yeah.
What?
It,
How high do you think that? So the record for uninterrupted flight is the
no, hold on.
common
Hold on.
swift. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
want to
I
ask
got
you
another trivia here.
all right. And by the way, you missed your calling in life, or you dodged your calling. Zoology. Like
No, man.
you know more about this. You're sandbagging on the level of knowledge you have about obscure species and habitats and those like
Let me
this
put
is
I'm going to put
this
a pin in that right there, and we're going to come back to that. I have a, but ask your question.
I mean that's a thing. This is I'm we're learning in real time. We're learning in public, and I'm learning that you have probably a passion for, but certainly a knowledge of all things species and habitat.
Right.
Anyway, question is, how did because these evolutionary biologists and evolutionary psychologists have sort of made their way into pop Twitter culture or culture. Do you view them as pseudosciences?
No, not at all. I mean, so this was so I'll go with the example of the book I read, which was an actual book written by uh, a full time credentialed scientist who was, they had a co author for the book, I think. So their day to day was researching animals, right? Like this is their job, this is their career, this is their profession, this is their area of expertise, and the popularization of it was, I guess, it was intended to make it more accessible, but it was also, I mean, it's also just an example of showing your work. And if you learned all this stuff about animals but nobody knows about it, what was even the point of doing that? So I consider it pretty generic, you know, publication of this was, I mean, this was a novel and interesting example of it. Now, like, same thing. I get a lot of my factoids from TikTok. Usually it's a TikTok. I don't even know what they're called. A reel, a story, a TikTok. Okay, so it's a TikTok, and then I get it several weeks later on Instagram with the TikTok watermark still on it. And there's a bunch of people that are, now quite a bit younger who are, I would say, enthusiasts or students of the craft or semi-pro, and they're talking all about different animals. And they're definitely coming at it from the same way. It's the same type of engagement that I'm giving you about, the common swift and the longest uninterrupted flight, which by the way is 10 months without touching the ground. And the next one I had was what's the highest recorded bird, 37,000 feet bird flight. Yeah, got hit by
What
got hit by an airplane. That's how we knew they were up high.
what bird is that?
I can't remember the exact name. It only lives in one part of Africa, but it's a type of vulture.
A pterodactyl?
Those are extinct, Terry, and I can see why you would pronounce the P, given that your name is the first half of the dinosaur.
Pterodactyl.
Yeah,
Did that confuse you as a kid, by the way? Like
yeah.
silent
There's
letters?
a whole book of it. There's a book called I think I'll have to look it up, but I think it's called Terrible Alphabet, and it's called P is for pterodactyl, a terrible book of words, and it's all just words that have like new GNU.
Yeah.
What?
Where did we get that? Is that Germanic?
I
Is
think
it
it's
Latin?
Latin. I
Is
think
it
it's Latin.
Latin?
Yeah, pterodactyl is Latin. I don't know about new.
We should
Do you want to know why I shouldn't? Well, I mean, fine. I can go be a biologist, but my wife is very enthusiastic about the weather, and I say the same thing that you're saying to me about animals. I say you could go be a meteorologist. She's like, no, I'm good. I'm happy with. I'm just a gifted amateur that follows this as a fan. And the I think the important part is you could be whatever. the gap between me being passionate for the animal kingdom and being studying the animal kingdom, or being passionate for undersea videography and being a Titanic explorer. Like, having the passion is the first step, and then like the only thing from there to doing the thing is doing the thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't, I'm not. That's not to mean that I am equivalent to a zoologist, but or a beekeeper, a zookeeper, or whatever. Like I'm not equivalent to the thing, but like, man, just go learn the stuff. It's the
Yeah.
first step. You're almost there.
Well, that's one of my favorite discussions that we've had recently is the distinction between the credential and the doing.
Yeah,
The doing of the thing is the only thing that matters.
we're gonna have to come up with like a counterpoint and find people that have a really strong explanation of why the credential is the most important thing. And then I'll have to open my mind up and be accepting of a counterpoint.
Well, I think I think in the medical space or in medical research, probably the credential matters because there are ethical concerns about what you do and don't research. I mean, we don't want garage enthusiasts working with cadavers or out looking for cadavers. So I think that would be one area. You don't want an garage aviation enthusiast like taking down planes. There's a video some YouTube clown made about parachuting out of an airplane and just letting it crash to video it.
I saw this.
And he's in a whole bunch of trouble. And I think that's an
He's not just
example.
in trouble; he's going to jail.
And he should, goon.
The story is a licensed pilot bails out of an airplane, lets the airplane crash for the views. He's armed with a parachute and a selfie stick in this small plane, and that's a case where it's almost, I mean, obviously it's terrible that that happened for reasons like taking advantage of the aviation safety system and crashing a plane into a place where you have no idea where it's going to crash, and wasting everybody's time on the rescue squad type of stuff. So it's bad for all of those reasons. But the tens of thousands of comments from other pilots roasting this guy, I'm like, I never would have known that about the detail of all the things that were wrong with this. And it was a nice little slice into what is private aviation look like, and the rules and the regulations and the whys and the hows and the clubbiness of it all, but also why that club is helpful and how it keeps people safe and everything like that. And I get to watch it all just in the comments on this YouTube video, and then in the reactions elsewhere on social media. Being on winter vacation has caused me to dramatically increase my consumption of animal TikToks and ridiculous airplane bailouts. But 30 seconds at a time is a great way to get exposure to little corners of the world you had no idea existed. Someday I'm gonna make a list of obscure corners of Earth, industries and jobs and stuff, and you're gonna have to guess: is this something that I'm following on TikTok and Instagram, or is it something I just made up?
Yeah. I will not be able to tell that difference.
It'll be fun.
Now, that's the other interesting thing about infinite knowledge or
Mm-hmm.
lack of, infinite sources of unknown things.
Yeah,
I feel like there are almost infinite sources of jobs and ways of living too. Like we
yeah,
we we know our area and we're tangentially aware of other things in our area, but I think there are so many ways of living that, for instance, this is something kind of tying a little circle here. There's a group of aquatic tribesmen, and I forget where. Maybe it's South America, maybe who knows. Probably close to Australia, but they're aquatic tribesmen, and they've evolved to be able to be underwater for like 3 to 5 minutes at a time. I think is the increment of time, or maybe it's even longer, like some long increment of time. Like their lungs they can hold air for a lot longer, and that's how they sustain their village and their family. They spearfish, and they do it like no gear. They dive, and they've evolved over time to be able to you know hold oxygen for considerably longer than anybody else. I love that stuff too. we're just animals at the end of the day.
We're all just we're all just watery meat sacks
Yeah, we're
trying to
just
trying to get
animals.
from place to place, from meal to meal.
Yeah.
So go as long as you're just going to be a fleshy meat sack, go pick up a guitar. What better time to start than now?
Yeah. Yeah. Distinguish yourself from the other blobs in some fashion and at least be able to crank out music.
Take it easy, Terry.
Have a great day, man.